NCIS Season 24. Leak, Tony and Ziva's shocking fight turns into romance. The NCIS bullpen had survived explosions, betrayals, kidnappings, and impossible missions, but nothing could prepare fans for the emotional storm that erupted when Tony DiNozzo and Ziva David finally found themselves standing face-to-face once again. Rumors surrounding NCIS Season 24 have been spreading rapidly ever since Michael Weatherly's return was confirmed for a season-long arc, while details about Ziva's future remain tightly guarded. But imagine if the biggest surprise wasn't an action sequence. Imagine if it all began with a fight. The episode opens with NCIS headquarters receiving intelligence about an international arms broker connected to one of Ziva's former Mossad operations. Gibbs may be gone, but the case still carries echoes of the past. Tony walks into the bullpen wearing his familiar confident grin. "Miss me?" McGee rolls his eyes. Torres laughs. Even Parker can't hide a smile. Then the elevator doors slide open. Standing there is Ziva. Silence. For a brief second, neither of them speaks. Fans expect an emotional reunion. Instead, "What are you doing here?" Ziva asks coldly. Tony's smile instantly disappears. The tension becomes unbearable. Tony explains that Director Parker personally requested his help because of his knowledge of the suspect. Ziva doesn't believe him. "You always have another reason," Tony fires back. "And you always think the worst of me." The room freezes. Even Torres quietly slips away. Old wounds suddenly reopen. Years apart have left scars that neither of them has admitted still exist. Tony feels abandoned after all the years of waiting. Ziva believes Tony moved on too easily. Neither realizes they're both hiding exactly the same pain. The investigation forces them into the field together. Neither wants the assignment. Neither has a choice. Inside an abandoned warehouse, they argue over every decision. Tony wants to rush inside. Ziva insists on patience. "You've never learned." "No," Tony replies. "I just learned not to lose people I love." The words hit Ziva harder than any bullet. She says nothing. That evening, they return to the safe house. Rain pounds against the windows. Electricity flickers. Neither can sleep. Tony quietly sits at the kitchen table drinking coffee. Ziva eventually walks in. Without looking at him, she asks, "Do you ever stop pretending everything is okay?" Tony laughs bitterly. "Do you?" Silence fills the room. For the first time in years, masks begin to fall. Tony admits he never stopped loving her. Not for one day. Not even when they were oceans apart. Not even when life became easier pretending she wasn't the center of his world. Ziva stares at him. She wants to answer. Instead, she simply whispers, "You should hate me." Tony slowly shakes his head. "I've tried." The next morning, everything changes. The arms dealer ambushes their convoy. Bullets fly in every direction. Tony pushes Ziva behind cover just before an explosion tears through the street. Debris crashes everywhere. Smoke fills the air. When Ziva opens her eyes, Tony is gone. Panic overwhelms her. She searches frantically through the burning wreckage. "Tony!" No answer. Again, "Tony!" Finally, she hears a weak voice beneath collapsed concrete. "I'm starting to think this date isn't going well." Despite the danger, she laughs, then cries. At the same time, after rescuing him, she refuses to leave his side. At the hospital, doctors insist Tony only suffered minor injuries. But Ziva remains beside his bed throughout the night. Tony wakes to find her asleep while holding his hand. He smiles. For once, neither of them is running. The following morning, Tony quietly says, "You know? You snore." Without opening her eyes, Ziva replies, "You deserved worse." Both laugh. Years of pain suddenly begin melting away. Back at NCIS headquarters, the team notices something different. Tony and Ziva still tease each other, still argue, still compete, but now, every sarcastic remark carries warmth instead of anger. Every glance lasts just a little longer. McGee notices first. Torres notices second. Even Parker smiles. They're finally acting like partners again. McGee quietly replies, "No. They're acting like family." As the investigation reaches its climax, Tony and Ziva confront the mastermind behind the international conspiracy. The criminal reveals he intentionally manipulated evidence, knowing Tony and Ziva would blame each other. He understood one simple truth: broken hearts make dangerous weaknesses. He almost succeeded. Almost. Instead, their renewed trust becomes their greatest weapon. Working together with flawless precision, they dismantle the entire organization in spectacular fashion. One final arrest. One final victory. One final chapter closes. That evening, Paris calls. Their daughter Tali appears on a video screen. So, are you two done fighting? Tony and Ziva exchange embarrassed looks. Maybe. Tali smiles knowingly. Good. You two are impossible without each other. Children really do notice everything. Later, Tony walks Ziva outside NCIS headquarters. Washington is unusually quiet. The city lights reflect across the pavement after the rain. Neither wants to leave. Neither knows what comes next. Tony finally speaks. We've spent years surviving. Maybe it's time we started living. Ziva slowly steps closer. So, what does living look like? Tony smiles. It starts with dinner. No missions. No secrets. No disappearing. Just us. She looks into his eyes for several long seconds. Then, she nods. I'd like that. As they walk away together, Tony gently reaches for her hand. This time, she doesn't pull away. Their fingers intertwine naturally, as though all the lost years had finally disappeared. The camera slowly pulls back. Two former agents, two soulmates, two survivors. Their greatest battle was never against terrorists or international criminals. It was against the walls they built around their own hearts. And after one explosive fight, love finally won. Disclaimer: this is a fan-created fictional story inspired by the NCIS universe. It is not based on confirmed Season 24 plot details. While Michael Weatherly's return has been officially announced, the events, dialogue, and Tony Ziva romance described above are entirely imaginative. NCIS Season 24. Leak: Tony and Ziva's shocking fight turns into romance. Part 2. Tony and Ziva's first dinner together in years was supposed to be simple. No cases, no weapons, no secrets, just two people trying to rediscover what had once made them unstoppable. The small waterfront restaurant overlooked the Potomac River, its lights reflecting across the calm water. For the first few minutes, neither of them knew what to say. Tony finally broke the silence. So, do we pretend the last decade never happened? Ziva smiled faintly. I don't think either of us is that good an actor. They laughed, and for the first time in years, the tension between them disappeared. Then Tony reached across the table. I'm tired of losing time with you. Ziva looked into his eyes. So am I. Before either of them could say another word, Tony's phone rang. Director Parker. We've got a problem. Minutes later, they arrived at NCIS headquarters, where McGee had uncovered encrypted files hidden inside the arms dealer's computer. It wasn't just a weapons network, McGee explained. It was a list. A list of what? Tony asked. McGee turned the monitor toward them. Former undercover operatives. Ziva's face immediately turned pale. Their names were on it, along with dozens of agents from around the world. Someone was hunting everyone who had ever worked against the organization. Parker ordered the entire team into action. If this list gets out, people will die. Tony exchanged a worried glance with Ziva. This isn't over. Within hours, another shocking discovery emerged. One name on the list had already been crossed out. Former Mossad officer Eli Ben-Hanan. Status: eliminated. Another name flashed in red. Anthony DiNozzo. Target: active. Before anyone could react, the lights inside NCIS suddenly went dark. Emergency alarms echoed through the building. Security breach! Casey shouted. The backup generators kicked in just long enough to reveal masked intruders moving through the corridors. They're inside! Torres yelled. Gunfire erupted. Tony pushed Ziva behind a concrete pillar as bullets shattered the glass around them. The attackers weren't trying to steal evidence. They were after Tony. During the firefight, one of the masked operatives cornered Tony in the evidence room. "You've been difficult to find," the stranger said. Tony smirked. "I get that a lot." The attacker lunged forward. A brutal hand-to-hand fight followed. Punches echoed through the room as shelves collapsed around them. Just as Tony began losing ground, Ziva burst through the doorway. Without hesitation, she tackled the attacker, allowing Tony to recover. Working together like they had years before, they quickly gained the advantage. The intruder escaped through an emergency exit, leaving behind only a small encrypted device. Casey analyzed it immediately. Her expression changed. "Oh no." "What is it?" Parker asked. "It contains a countdown." "To what?" Casey swallowed. "It doesn't say." "Only 12 hours remain." The room fell silent. Nobody knew whether the countdown led to a cyber attack, an assassination, or something even worse. Later that night, Tony stood alone on the roof of NCIS headquarters. Washington stretched out beneath him, quiet but uneasy. Ziva joined him. "You blame yourself," she said softly. "I always do." She stepped closer. "You cannot carry every burden alone." Tony looked at her. "I almost lost you more times than I can count." "And I almost lost you." Neither spoke again. Instead, Ziva gently rested her head against his shoulder. For several peaceful moments, the danger below seemed to disappear. Then Tony quietly whispered, "If we survive this..." Ziva looked up. "I'm done running." She smiled through tears. "So am I." Just then, Parker's voice crackled over Tony's phone. "Everyone back to the operations room. We've identified the mastermind." McGee projected a classified surveillance image onto the large screen. Tony's smile vanished. Ziva froze. The photograph showed someone they both believed had died years ago. Someone who knew every one of their weaknesses. Someone who had been watching them from the shadows all along. The screen faded to black. NCIS, Season 24. Leak, Tony and Ziva's shocking fight turns into romance. Part 3. The operations room fell completely silent. No one blinked. No one spoke. On the giant screen was the face of a man Tony and Ziva had buried in their memories years ago. "That's impossible," Tony whispered. Ziva slowly shook her head. "I watched the explosion myself." Casey enlarged the surveillance image. Facial recognition returned a 98.7% match. Codename, Lazarus. Official status, deceased. Current status, unknown. Director Parker folded his arms. "Apparently, someone forgot to tell him." McGee brought up a classified file. "For the last 10 years, someone has been quietly rebuilding the same criminal network Ziva destroyed during her final Mossad mission. And every trail ends with Lazarus." Tony stared at the screen. "If he's alive, this has never been about weapons." Ziva finished the sentence. "It has always been about revenge." Hours later, NCIS intercepted an encrypted transmission. A single location, an abandoned naval communication station on the Chesapeake Bay. Parker assembled the team. "This ends tonight." Tony checked his weapon. Ziva tightened the straps on her tactical vest. Neither needed to say a word. They both knew what was waiting. Rain hammered the coastline as the NCIS convoy arrived. The old station stood in darkness, surrounded by rusted antennas and abandoned buildings. Torres scanned the area. "Too quiet?" Tony nodded. "I hate quiet." The team moved in. Every step echoed through the empty corridors. Suddenly, boom! The floor exploded beneath them. Smoke filled the hallway. Concrete rained from the ceiling. Separated by the blast, Tony found himself trapped inside the communications room while Ziva was forced deeper into the underground bunker. "Tony!" she shouted through the dust. "I'm okay," he answered. "For now." Deep underground, Ziva discovered dozens of computer servers still running. Maps, bank accounts, intelligence files, photos of undercover agents from around the world. Lazarus hadn't just survived, he had built an empire. Then a slow clap echoed behind her. "You've always been resourceful." Ziva turned. Standing in the shadows was Lazarus himself. Older, scarred, but unmistakably alive. "You look surprised," he said. You should be dead, Ziva replied coldly. So should you. He smiled. And yet here we are. Elsewhere, Tony finally forced open the collapsed doorway. McGee's voice crackled over the radio. Tony, we've got movement heading toward Ziva. I'm on my way. He sprinted through the underground tunnels, ignoring the pain in his shoulder from the earlier explosion. Back inside the control room, Lazarus slowly circled Ziva. I spent years watching your family. I watched Tony. I watched Tali. I know where they live. Ziva's expression hardened. If you say my daughter's name again, Lazarus laughed. You'll what? Before he could finish, Ziva attacked. The fight was fierce. Punches, elbows, kicks, furniture crashed across the room. Neither gained the advantage. Then Lazarus reached for a hidden pistol. Before he could fire, bang! Tony's shot struck the weapon, sending it flying across the floor. You picked the wrong family, Tony said. Lazarus smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. The battle became 2 against 1. Tony and Ziva moved together with the effortless precision that had once made them NCIS's most legendary team. Tony anticipated every move. Ziva finished every attack. Years apart no longer mattered. They trusted each other completely. Finally, Lazarus stumbled backward onto the control platform. Desperate, he slammed a large red switch. Warning sirens filled the bunker. Casey's voice came over the radio. He activated the self-destruct system. Everyone has 5 minutes before this place collapses. Lazarus escaped through a narrow maintenance tunnel. Tony started after him, but Ziva grabbed his arm. We don't have time. If we let him go, if we stay, Tali loses us both. Tony looked into her eyes. She was right. For the first time, revenge wasn't the priority. Their future was. He nodded. Let's go. The NCIS team raced through the collapsing tunnels. Steel beams crashed behind them. Water burst through broken pipes. The exit seemed impossibly far away. Just as they reached daylight, the entire underground complex exploded. A massive fireball rose into the stormy sky. Everyone hit the ground. Silence followed. The bunker was gone. So was Lazarus. Or so they hoped. Back at NCIS headquarters the next morning, Parker congratulated the team. The network is destroyed. Hundreds of undercover agents are safe. Casey smiled. We recovered enough data to dismantle the rest of the organization. Torres leaned back. For once, we actually won. Everyone laughed. For the first time in days, the building felt peaceful. That evening, Tony and Ziva returned home to Paris. Tali ran through the front door the moment she saw them. You came back! Tony lifted her into his arms. I told you we would. Ziva wrapped both of them in a tight embrace. For several minutes, none of them let go. No missions, no enemies, just family. Later that night, after Tali had fallen asleep, Tony and Ziva stood together on the balcony overlooking the Paris skyline. I almost lost you again, Tony said quietly. Ziva took his hand. But you didn't. Tony smiled. No more running. No more secrets. No more goodbyes. Ziva stepped closer until only inches separated them. I have waited a very long time to hear you say that. Under the glow of the city lights, Tony gently kissed her. This time, there were no interruptions, no alarms, no explosions, only the promise of a new beginning. Far away, hidden in the shadows of a remote European harbor, a lone figure watched a news report about the destruction of the criminal network. The figure smiled, then quietly switched off the television. You've won the battle, Dinozo, the stranger whispered, but the game is only beginning. NCIS, Season 24. Leak, Tony and Ziva's shocking fight turns into romance, Part 4. Paris had never felt so peaceful. For the first time in years, Tony Dinozzo woke up without the sound of gunfire, encrypted phones, or emergency alerts. Sunlight streamed through the apartment windows as the smell of fresh coffee drifted from the kitchen. Ziva was already awake. So, Tony said with a grin, does this mean we're officially retired? Ziva raised an eyebrow. You? Retired? I was trying to be optimistic. She laughed. I give you 2 weeks. Before Tony could answer, Tali rushed into the room carrying a sketchbook. I made something. She opened it to reveal a drawing of the 3 of them standing together beneath the Eiffel Tower. Across the top, she had written, My family. Tony and Ziva exchanged a quiet glance. Neither needed words to understand how much that simple drawing meant. Back in Washington, Director Parker wasn't enjoying the same peaceful morning. Casey rushed into the bullpen with a worried expression. We've got a problem. McGee looked up from his computer. I thought we shut Lazarus's network down. We did. Casey placed a flash drive on the table. This wasn't found in the bunker. It was mailed here. Parker frowned. By whom? Casey swallowed. There was no return address. Inside the drive was a single video. The timestamp showed it had been recorded only 6 hours earlier. The screen flickered to life. A masked figure appeared. If you're watching this, the stranger said, then Lazarus is gone. Everyone froze. The stranger continued. He believed revenge was enough. He was wrong. My mission is much bigger. The video suddenly ended. On the final frame, one symbol appeared, a black raven. McGee leaned closer. I've never seen that emblem before. Parker nodded. Find out who they are. Across the Atlantic, Tony's phone vibrated. He looked at the caller, ID Director Parker. Tony sighed. I knew retirement wouldn't last. After hearing Parker explain the situation, Tony looked at Ziva. She already knew the answer before he spoke. We're going back. Hours later, the family arrived at NCIS headquarters. Tali was welcomed warmly by McGee, Torres, and Casey, who promised to keep her entertained while the adults worked. Seeing everyone together again felt strangely familiar, almost like old times. Casey soon made a breakthrough. The raven symbol isn't connected to any known terrorist organization. So, what is it? Torres asked. It's a private intelligence network. McGee added, one that sells secrets to the highest bidder. Tony folded his arms. So they don't care about politics. They care about money. Exactly. Their investigation led them to a luxury gala being held at a historic Washington hotel. The mysterious Raven organization was expected to attend. Tony and Ziva would have to go undercover. Again. Later that evening, Tony adjusted his tuxedo. I forgot how uncomfortable these things are. Ziva smiled as she stepped out wearing an elegant black evening gown. Tony stared. For several seconds, he forgot how to speak. What? She asked. You look... He paused. Dangerous. She smirked. I'll take that as a compliment. You should. They walked into the ballroom arm in arm, looking less like federal agents and more like the most glamorous couple in the room. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, while diplomats, billionaires, and military contractors mingled across the hall. Somewhere among them was the Raven's representative. As soft music filled the room, Tony whispered into his hidden microphone. Anything? Casey's voice answered. Not yet. Then Ziva noticed a silver cufflink on a man's sleeve, engraved into it. A tiny black raven. She gently squeezed Tony's hand. Target acquired. The man quietly left the ballroom and headed toward the rooftop. Tony and Ziva followed. Outside, the city lights stretched into the distance. The stranger stood waiting. You've been looking for me, he said. Tony smiled. Funny? We were about to say the same thing. The man slowly removed his gloves. My name doesn't matter. What matters is this. He handed Tony a sealed envelope. Inside was a photograph. Tony's smile disappeared. It was a recent picture of Tali walking home from school in Paris. A message was written across the bottom in black ink. You can protect each other, but can you protect her? Rage flashed across Tony's face. Ziva's expression turned ice cold. The stranger calmly stepped backward toward a waiting helicopter. This is only the beginning. Before either of them could stop him, the helicopter lifted into the night sky and disappeared. Tony crumpled the photograph in his fist. No one threatens our daughter. Ziva stood beside him. Her voice was calm, but filled with determination. Then we end this. As the helicopter vanished into the darkness, neither of them realized they were already being watched through the scope of a sniper rifle positioned on a distant rooftop. The unseen shooter whispered into a radio, "Phase 2 has begun." Disclaimer. This is a completely fictional fan story inspired by the NCIS universe and its characters. It is not based on any confirmed Season 24 plot or leaked script.